you can never plot your course. Like, we all try to control it and say this is what it's going to look like, but we can't control the journey. You can control the process, but you can't control the journey. And that's the cosmos. That's the world. So did I ever think audio would really be the conduit that would make my stories find readers? The truth is that you have to ride out the journey, and it's going to be up, it's going to be bumpy, and it's going to have positives and negatives, but you have to be the cheerleader for yourself, and you have to believe more than everybody else.
Hi, everyone. I'm Daniel Azarian.
And I'm Tara Langella.
And welcome to The Process, the show where we deconstruct the creative process with professionals from all disciplines. Join us as we offer a masterclass in innovation and imagination.
Today, we are so beyond thrilled to have as our guest the fabulous TJ London. TJ London is an acclaimed author and is best known for her successful series of books delving into the Revolutionary War, including titles like The Tory, The Traitor, The Turncoat, Man of War, and the eagerly anticipated, cannot wait, The Rebel, set to release this winter. Beyond the American Revolution, TJ's fascination extends to the French Revolution, the French and Indian War, and the Russian Revolution. A true storyteller, TJ's mission is to breathe life into the forgotten corners of history, those intriguing yet sadly overlooked places. Hailing from metropolitan Detroit, but secretly yearning to be a Londoner, she shares her home with her husband Fred and her feline companion Hamilton. Join us for an engaging conversation with the rebel, liberal, lover, fighter, and Mohawk rockin' mistress of the revolution herself, and may I also add, super badass, TJ London. TJ, welcome to The Process.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Wow, you did a really good job with that. You made me sound better than I feel like I am.
You are a badass. You are a warrior woman. Are you kidding me? Oh, we have so many questions to ask you about your process.
This is really exciting for me, by the way, to have one of my narrators here with me asking me questions. So this is awesome. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
We like to start off the show by asking our guests, what does the creative process, that term, mean to you?
What does the creative process mean to me? That's like a loaded question, right? Because creative for me is both the writing component and the audio component, so it's twofold. And to me, while they're together, they're separate too, right? The creative process for me is the muse, right? It's the energy that gives you the story. It's the energy that helps you deliver to the page. It's the cosmos kind of speaking to you. So it's kind of a spiritual thing for me, right? It's very emotional, and yet it's also very grounded in science, right? Like this is what I do to write. This is what I do to research my stories. So it's emotional, but it's also scientific. I guess that's a kind of my lead into the creative process.
I love that answer. I love that. I love how you have the muse, and then you have this kind of like, very kind of logical, which you do. You need both, really, when you're creating, right? In order to get things done, you need that analytical part. Now, I want to ask you about your muse. And when you discovered the muse, did you always write? Was this something that was, did you start very young? When did you discover your muse? When did you discover you had this fire in you to create?
I wrote my first publication in terms of like something that ended up being published was when I was in second grade, and it was a poem. And it was about Christmas because I loved Christmas and I wrote it. But after I did that, I was like, I kind of like writing, but, being a 2-year, like in second grade, it wasn't something that was going to, go anywhere at that point. We have a lot of things. I mean, I wanted to be on a fire truck when I was a kid. I wanted to be a nurse. I wanted to be a cashier, all the things, right? It was when I got older and I was in school and I did a lot of scientific training. I missed that creative side of my brain. Like there was a side I felt like that just doesn't connect in science. That was, in a different space, and I wanted to be creative. So I kind of wrote, and it was just for the fun of it, and I put stuff on a computer, but I didn't really do anything very serious. it was really as I got older and I was actually like out practicing in the world and doing my real job, I'm like, okay, started to reconnect with that creative piece of myself. And that muse started to open up again. And then it really opened up after a couple tragic things happened in my life. And I started going to counseling. And I think we've talked about this before, but for those who've never heard this before, my writing now, my muse really comes from, it's kind of a way of me translating what my inner emotions are. So my muse is my ability to tap into what's going on in my life per se. And unfortunately, I can't analytically just look at my problems and go, hey, this is what's wrong in Tracy and this is how we solve it. It's more like, hey, what is John Carlyle doing today? Okay, this is what he's doing. And as I write him or I write my characters, then I start to discover, okay, this is what's going on in me emotionally. So I'm very connected to my muse. My emotions are very connected to it. But I personally, like on the very cerebral level, like need to use that as the conduit to my creativity, if that makes sense. So it was something that started when I was very young and then I revisited it. But then when these certain events happened in my life that I needed to connect with that emotional side of myself, the only way I could connect was through writing. And so now that's my tool to how I kind of connect with my muse is when I'm, working through my own conundrums, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yes. Oh, that's fascinating because I find, as an actor, right, sort of when you're working through something, you're working through the character. For you, it's the opposite because you're creating the characters, right, and you're dealing with that emotion through them. Like you're creating it.
Right. Yeah. So I'm kind of weirdly separated from like my as I look at my problems and I can't solve them one-on-one. Like if I just look at them and say, okay, this is what's going wrong in TJ's life. Like this is what we need to fix. But as I write John Carlyle or Dallas McKesson, right, I started to write them and I would go talk with my counselor and we would read through pages and she'd ask me, well, why is John doing this? Or why is, Dallas doing this? And it was like, well, because this and this and this is going on in her life. And then it's like, this is what's going on in my life. And the same thing kind of happened with each one of my books. So we could actually dissect each one of my books or the muses that helped me created them. And we could go through, I could tell you verbatim what was going on in my life and why I wrote and made the choices I did in each story. So it's really my conduit to connecting with my own emotional well-being and my own mental health challenges. That's how I connect to them. So my muse really kind of is the conduit to my inner self, I guess is the best way to put it. And so I commonly call my muse John because he's my main character, but Dallas is also too. And it's kind of me experimenting with both the feminine and the masculine side of my humanity, as we all have, right? And so I've just used those two characters to really kind of connect to what it is I'm emotionally or spiritually going through. So they teach me the story.
So it's very personal for you, writing.
Yeah, it's almost, sometimes, no, every author, it's personal. Like, let's just, I'm pretty sure everyone you've had in this seat as an author says the same thing, right? What I will say is that everybody has a different connection to their work, I'm sure on different levels, and each book that they write, for me, it's extremely personal. They're coming directly from my life. I mean, we can open up The Rebel right now, the one that I just finished, and I can tell you, boom, 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 exactly where everything comes from. So for me, it's extremely personal.
So what's really interesting to me is with that personal connection, but you have an entire world of what you would write on, and you are writing historical fiction, specifically the American Revolutionary War. I'd love to know, where did that start? What was it something you were always interested in? And how did you get to that moment? I'm going to write about the American Revolutionary War. Like, where did that come from?
So my editor wishes I would say, I was never going to write the American Revolutionary War because in historical, it's not the most popular time period. But I write for mental health and I write for passion. So for me, it was never about writing for anything else but what my journey was, my internal journey. So I never thought in terms of like what would market better, what would work better, what would sell. It was all about me and the process and the journey I was going through. So when I was a young girl, I'm a Gen Xer. Comedy, there used to be made for TV shows, like specials with all these famous people would show up on. There was like Lonesome Dove and North and South. Everybody knows all of them. So, right, if I take you guys back, right?
Dove,
so back
my
in
favorite.
the day,
oh my God.
Right? So back in the day, there was one called The Bastard and the Rebel, and it was by John Jakes, right? And now if you watch it, it's so dated and bad, but the book is fabulous. I don't want to take away from John Jakes, right? But I watched that and I was intrigued by the clothing. Now I look at the costuming and I'm like, that was bad. But the clothing, like, and mind you, this is a 5-year-old girl's brain. I saw the clothing and I was like, wow, like I love that. And it stayed with me, okay? So flash forward several years later, my dad and I were very close. He was born on the 4th of July, so Colonial Williamsburg. He was really into all the patriotic things. And so we went together to Colonial Williamsburg, and there was that clothing again and that look in that era. And I truly believe, and I think every historical author can say this, that they are reincarnated from their time period, that they live in, that they write. And there was something very spiritual that happened to me when I visited Colonial Williamsburg. And I was like I was here. I've been to this time period. Like this is why it resonates with me. And my love of the American Revolution stayed with me. And I did tons of historical reading over the years and, you know, just loved the time period and was just a fan of reading about it, you know, as I was going through school. So flash forward to when I started to counsel, when my father was very ill, he died very tragically. And there were other events that were going on in my life. My counselor and I were meeting regularly, and I was in a very, very bad place. And she's like, listen, I'm really concerned about you being in a hotel rooms by yourself. I mean, I was suicidal, and I'm not going to make light of that. That's just what it was. And she was like, I'm really worried about you being in hotels, traveling on the road. What can we do, you know, to keep you occupied and to be thinking and positive and moving in the right direction? And I said, well, I used to write, but it wasn't something I took seriously. She's like, well, fantastic. I want you to pick something that you wrote before and just take off with it. So I went home and looked at my husband. I said, well, this is what she wants me to do. And he's like, well, I'm like, I wrote about this. I wrote about World War II and I wrote about the Revolutionary War. What do I do? He's like, let's do the Revolutionary War. I said, okay, here we go. And that's literally as much thought as went into it when I finally made the decision. But understand, there was at no point was I planning to publish it. This was just counseling. So this was just me using it as a tool to talk to myself, to speak to myself, to understand what was going wrong in my life and to relay it to my counselor. So this was never meant to actually go any further and be American Revolutionary War. And now that's what I write and that's what everyone knows me for. So if that makes sense.
No, that's fascinating.
Perfect sense.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. And it's so, and you know, TJ, when you said that about living in that time, I so get that from this world that you created. And I think it's one of the reasons the characters resonate so deeply with everyone. And myself, speaking for myself, they're just so incredibly detailed and it's incredible all the work that you put into this saga. Talk about, you know, you say it was always meant for you, which again, that's a true artist, right? This is you just creating for the sake of creating for yourself, for that self-discovery.
Right.
When did you say, I want to share this? Because it's such a personal journey for you. That's a lot to be able to say, this is me. Oh, this is me here, all of me, because you put all of you in it. There's no question about it.
I don't leave anything on the table. You're absolutely right.
It was literally like, you know, there's a wonderful line from the Bharat Sad, the play, about sort of like what life is about, you know, like ripping yourself open and just kind of, you know, letting that. And that is what and I think that is what artists do. And you did that with this saga. So when did you go, I'm going to share this. I'm going to share me with the world?
So I never intended to, and that I stand firmly behind. It was my counselor. So originally the book was called Just the Traitor, and it was just supposed to be the traitor. That was it. It was never meant to be produced, nothing. And when I got to the end of, which we know now was the book, The Tory and the Traitor Together, when I got to the end of that, I was like, well, my life still sucks. John Carlisle's life isn't much better. Neither is Nella. Like, what the heck do we do, right? Like, where do we go now? And my counselor's like, well, that's not the answer I was looking for, but okay. She's like, well, we just keep writing. And I said, okay, because I had a lot of work to still do. But she's like, why don't you let somebody read this? And I'm like, whoa, that was not part of the plan, right? And because you can be unapologetically yourself and abandon when you're writing for yourself and no one's going to see it. That's a freeing thing, right? And I'm taking into some very dark issues and places in my psyche, right? But I never wanted like anyone to see this, right? So I chose wisely a couple local artists that I knew that I was very good friends with. I said, here, just take this and tell me what you think. It was when one of them came back to me and said, yeah, it's rough, but you might have something here. I was like, okay. And so my counselor was like, Tracy, you were a published scientist. That's what you love to do, was research and publication. Why can't you try this? So I was like, all right, let's see what happens. So I went to a big event called Romantic Times, which doesn't exist anymore. It's kind of like Readers Take Denver. And I went to this and met with several agents and just pitched the book, learned all about pitching and went and pitched the book. And I basically had one tell me, nobody likes Revolutionary War. Nobody wants a duology. Nobody's interested in a book that's, 200,000 words. And, nobody wants to hear about like this savior story. And I got all the things. And I walked out and walked into a corner and literally burst into tears. I was not in a good emotional place yet myself to handle that kind of criticism. But this woman walked up to me and she's like, hey, you okay? And I was like, no, I don't belong here. I'm a scientist. I'm not a writer. I'm not an author. And she's like, but you don't know that. I'm like, no, they pretty much told me. They told me. They agree. It's the consensus. And she's like, but you don't know. So she gave me her name and she said, you call me. So they were running a program to match up editors with new authors. Okay. Mind you, not long after this, RT folded and never came back again. Yeah. But I was the only person who ever got matched up with an editor. So my editor, her name is Kathy. She's still with me. She's my concept editor. I sent it to her and she's like, okay, listen, honey, I don't like Revolutionary War. Nobody reads it. Nobody wants it. Nobody's going to buy it. But you know what? I'm part of this. I agreed to do it. I got paid. So we're just going to make this happen. Okay. So already now another person is telling me no. So she calls me a week later. She's like, all right, this might be interesting. No one's going to publish it. No one's going to buy it. But that's okay. There's indie. You might end up in niche and we'll see what happens. And literally she read it and finished it and she's like, okay, this might be good. But nobody's going to buy it. But that's okay. You can still put it. I mean, this is literally what everybody said to me. So when that was finally done, I sent it to 36 different agents and was turned down by all 36. Some of them were not nice. Others were. Yeah. And I told my husband, I'm like, why am I doing this? And he's like, you know what, Trace? Just do it anyway. Just do it. So I met some beautiful people through RT who were independent authors. They're like, you can be anything you want to be, girl, in indie world. Go do you. And awesome to the people who are traditionally published. That's what's meant for them, but this was what was meant for me. So I made the decision to independently publish at that point and meant to never put anything out after the Tory. I just was going to do it for the sake of doing it and say I did it. And then this small group of fans discovered it and was like, well, what happens to John Carlyle and Dallas McKesson at the end of the Tory? Because we all know where it ends. It ends in this place of what if. And it was these maybe 5 or 6 fans that brought the Traitor about. And then it, kept going. So that's the long and short. But I didn't even have a pseudonym, seriously, because I have a pseudonym, obviously, until the day the cover artist called me. He's like, hey, what is your pseudonym? And I'm like, oh God, I have to have one of those, right? He's like, yeah, I'm trying to make the cover right now. Can you tell me right now? Because usually people think about this. They want to be very smart about their pseudonym. I'm like, I don't know, TJ London, my initials. And then that was it. So it was very happenstance.
You bring up, which I think a lot of our viewers would be interested in, working with your editor. I'm sure there's a lot of writers that maybe don't have an editor or maybe considering getting one. Can you talk a little bit about what a typical interaction would be with your editor? Do you come to her with an idea? Does she help you develop it? Or maybe just give us a little peek into that interaction.
So I have different types of editors. So I have a concept editor, which is what Kathy is. I have a what's called a copy editor who does a lot of my writing structural stuff. And then I have what's called a proofer, which is a proof editor. Now, granted, we're all freelance. We do the best that we can. It's not a perfect science, but so oftentimes editors are like marriages. They go bad, they go good. Sometimes they just go flat and you just part ways. But I mean, and I have been blessed. I've had many amazing editors, but I've also had to evolve past my editors into different positions. So I can talk about the two that I have right now. Okay. So Kathy is my concept editor, and this is a gal who's in her late 70s. She worked for RT. She was a reviewer. She was also a concept editor for many well-known authors back in the Avon golden days of like historic. So Kathleen Woodwis and Joanna Lindsay and Beatrice Small and all the old like school, we think of the original romance historical writers. So she and I talk kind of regularly. So I really kind of create my own stories. I'm a mixture of outlining or what they call planning and panzering. And so I'll put that together and I'll kind of give her a call and say, okay, Kat, this is what I think I'm thinking about doing. And she'll always be like, okay, don't do anything crazy, Tracy. And don't kill anybody off, but don't do this. And she'll give me all that, right? And then it's kind of like I will go and start my writing process. Then after a while, I'll go back to her and say, here's where I'm struggling sometimes, or I'm having a problem with this part of the story. And she'll be like, what about this? Think about this. Think about this. And then once I have a very rough draft of the book, she sees the roughest version of the book just to see that I'm hitting it on all the concepts in the storyline. So then after she does that, then I go back and do my work, right? Like some more edit work based on her. Then I actually go to betas. And betas are people that you implicitly trust and you choose them to look for certain things in your story. So I have betas who look at my story just for the content. Does everything make sense, match up all the different things, right? I have betas who look at me for my history going, well, that's not right, that's not right, that's not right, right? Because you have to have those. And then I have those who look at them for the storyline arc of the woman and the man. Would they do these things? Do these make sense? Do they romantically make sense? You know, based on tropes, because we ultimately all write to tropes no matter what we want to say we do. And then once I formulate all that kind of information, then I go back and do my own edit again. So I will say that I edit a book like probably 20 to 30 times before it even goes to print myself. Because I'm a pruner. Like it's a layering of editing. It's called I call it pruning. Basically, it's like a tree. You just want to make it your bonsai tree, like in Karate Kid. You want to make it look good, right? So my last editor, my copy editor, she's the one who goes, okay, here's all your sins in grammar. Check, check. You know, she gives the purple pen out, like, or the red pen, like the teacher, and marks off all your mistakes, right? So Rebecca is my my gal who I work with who does that, and I'm like, have the rebel. And she comes back and she's like, wow, Alexi's not very nice with all those commas and all those, you know, apostrophes and all those different things. So she goes back in and she does that. And so then we work back and forth through that process, but she'll also look for plot holes. I will tell you that I find most of them. I'm actually, because I'm closest to it, right? And then it goes to proof after that. That's the person who sees it the last, who hopefully they catch those missing words, but it's not a perfect science. So that's kind of like the edit process. Now, I know not everybody does that. And even doing all that, we still have errors and mistakes. I'm an independent. It's part of, you know, life and those things, but I do the best I can, you know.
You seem to be, just in hearing you talk now, that you're very open to suggestions and you take everything in and you know, I'm assuming that's correct. Or do you ever butt heads with a note and say like, you know what, I don't agree with that? Or are you pretty much like always evolving with when you get that feedback?
So the good thing and the bad thing about it is I'm a self-deprecating schlug. So if someone tells me I suck, I'm like, you're right, I suck. It's when they tell me that I'm really good or I did something great, I'm like, what are you lying about? Like, what's your angle? Right? So I'm actually really good at taking like that kind of criticism. And it's part of my own psyche issue that I've been working on. I'm still working towards it. I actually had someone tell me, no, you don't get to tell me I don't get to give you a compliment. Damn it. I get to tell you a compliment. So what happens is for me, I can only see the trees. I can't see the forest anymore after a while. And as a good author, and you spend a lot of time with your work, you start to recognize that I'm not seeing the trees. I'm not seeing the forest anymore. All I'm seeing is the trees. And if you're at that point, that's when you really do need people. So the first time as a newbie author, you always take it hard, right? You're like, ooh, they didn't like my storyline. But over time, the longer that you do it, the more you realize, okay, this might be their opinion. This might be their expectations of the story versus what my vision is. Now, when you're working with an editor, that person and you have to match on all your goals. And if you do match on all your goals and you're in the same headspace, then their criticism and their feedback should be directing you in the same way that you both want to go, right? So you can, usually those people, you trust them implicitly. Now, have I disagreed? Absolutely, I have. So one of the main things I disagreed on is it's in the Tory. One of the first scenes is Roger Delancey. I'm gonna spoiler alert. He scalps a woman at the beginning of the book, and my first editor was like, "Oh my God, like you're swinging hard from the very beginning of the book." I'm like, "Well, I'm setting the expectations for the reader. So if they don't like it, they're not going to read any further." And seriously told me, they're like, "No, you can't do that. This is like torture in a book." I'm like, "Yeah, well, read the rest of the series. You're going to find out it gets much more scary. So, if you can't handle it here, why keep reading?"
Yes.
Right? So, the other thing that I would have taken out had I followed an editor, it's in The Traitor. It's a very scandalous scene between John Carlyle and Celeste on a desk. And it leads to things that happen in the Turncoat. And she was like, "You can't put this in here. No one will want to read that. The hero can't sleep with this woman, and this can't happen." And I'm like, "Well, if it doesn't, I'm missing a whole book behind it." So needless to say, I'm like, I respect that you don't like it, but it's part of the story. And if it serves the story and it makes sense, sometimes you do disagree with the editor, right? Alexei McKesson, the character who's in The Rebel, who is the cousin of the female lead, Dallas McKesson, he does some things that are not very nice, as we know. And we get into his book and he's the hero and he does some things that are not very nice. And my editor was like, "Ooh." I'm like, "Yeah, welcome to my show," right? She's a newer editor to me. I'm like, "This is how it rolls." So you kind of have to communicate a lot. And you have to be willing to take their feedback, but you also have to be willing to stand your ground on your creativity. So that's the beauty of being indie, at least in this situation.
Nice.
That's so beautifully said. So that is, thank you, TJ, for breaking down your process so beautifully. And I love the fact that, yeah, you're open to communication, but you also have this, your story, your characters, your vision. And when it's time to say, "No, this is what I'm sticking to." And also your perseverance, right? Here you are. And this is a lesson for, all of our listeners. You were told no. And we all are, as creatives, we are going to be told no, 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 more times than we're told yes. More times than we're told yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and you've got to have such a sense of who you are to be able to go, "Okay, all right, what do I need to work on? How do I need to get better? But no, I'm going to keep on going. I am not going to stop." You did not stop. And thank the gods you didn't.
Well, they, seriously, I think it was one of those things when you get told no so many times, you're like, "Gosh darn it, now I'm going to do it just to spite you." You know what I mean? And I think that's every artist's journey, right? Like there is a small part of us, you have to be the champion for your artwork. Like I wrote this in my dedication on The Rebel. Your artwork, love it like it's your child and respect it like it's your lover. Like you need to love it like you've given, but you need to give it that same respect that you give your partner in this life. And if you do that, sometimes that means you're the one who believes for everybody. And it's the same in the audio. I remember as we started expanding our cast in the audio and thank God Danielle Lansrada, who's my producer, when I'd be like, "Can we have more cast? Can we get bigger? Can we do this?" She was like, I'm sure she was behind her phone going, but she was like, yeah, sure. And I'm like, no, it's going to be amazing. And then it's going to be amazing. So it's one of those things that you have to sometimes be you have to be all the cheerleader, all the belief, all the everything. So
about the audio, let's delve into the audio. And when you made that decision to do the audio and how you found your narrators, let's dish.
Oh, wow. This is like the secret sauce right here. I bet a lot of people want to know this secret. No, it's interesting because of how it happened. So there was an author who I'm very good friends with and I adore. She's like, I think John Carlyle would be great in audio. Personally, I think he's great in audio, but that's me. But she was like, I think he'd be great in audio. And I was like, I'm just a book. I just write books, and I have a real job, and like I had all the reasons it wasn't a good idea. So the pandemic hit in 2020. And I was approached by Jacqueline Protho from AudioFlow. And she was like, "Have you ever thought about putting that book in audio?" I'm like, "Have you read the Tory? Do you understand what the content is?" I'm like, "I don't know that the audio crowd is done for this." And she's like, "No, but I know my business." And that would do well. And of course she did. And she does. So she propositioned me about working with her. And I gave her this list of rules because I am a control freak. Must have this, must have this, must have this, must have this, must have this control, must have, because that is me. And I am a complete control freak with my artwork. Like I said, love it like it's your child, respected like it's your lover, So I ended up talking to my husband, and I'm like, well, I'm not doing any of these 2020. It's not like I'm going anywhere. I'm stuck in my house, right? Nobody's going anywhere. All right, what the heck? Let's do an audio. So that's really how it got started. And she said, so I told her, I've got 4 perspectives in the book. And if anybody listens to the Tory, it's different. It's not duet like the rest of the series. But I'm like, I've got these 4 perspectives. I've got John Carlyle, I've got Dallas McKesson, I've got Celeste Allen, and I've got Roger Delancey. I'm like, I need voices. And so she brings me this literally like 20, 30 voices to listen to. And I'm like, okay, all right, here we go. But you have to understand, when you write from counseling, listening to your own writing, it's a very, very difficult job. And just listening to my auditions was a trip through my own psyche. And I would have to stop frequently, and I would just go in my room and cry. And I would just be like, I can't do this. I can't do this. It was just like listening to my personal struggles now being read by people that I didn't know. So one of the things I had to do when I listened was to try to separate myself and my journey from the person interpreting it. I tried to, but what I realized was I could not do it. So I needed to find somebody who their performance spoke to my emotional center, which is your amygdala in your brain, right? It's that place in your brain where all our emotions come from. If I could find that person who made me want to cry, that made me hurt, then that was the person that needed to narrate that character, that could really become me in that character. And so the first voice I settled on was actually Patrick Zeller, who to this day is like, I'm not supposed to play favorites, but I'm going to play a little favorites here. I love Patrick Zeller, and he pulled out this Delancey performance that was just disturbing and fabulous. It's menacing. He's very heavy on the mic. There's all this heavy breathing. It's a very lush performance, but it's also a very powerful one. And he sounded like the angry part of my psyche, which is what Roger Delancey was. He was the angry part of my psyche that could not overcome certain challenges I was living through. And he just had the pacing of that angry side of my character. The second one I settled on was actually Marnie for Celeste Allen. She is that drawl, that very controlling, strong, doesn't betray much emotion, the side of the woman that like wants to do evil but doesn't. She just was that side of me that hurts with no impunity, like just does what she wants. And the side of me I wish could just do what she wanted through what was going on in my life. And then obviously Tara, you're next. So it's interesting. There were a lot of women who auditioned, and I got many beautiful auditions. But the one thing that your energy, like the frenetic, like strength and energy and power and the punchiness that you narrated, I was just like, she's me. She is me as Dallas. Like, you speak like I hear her in my head. And I'm just so emotionally wrapped into your audition. I was just like, this is the woman. Like, this is her. So that was how I really, so it's all about who actually triggers my emotion. If you just get into my cortex and I'm like, oh, that sounds cool and that's interesting, you haven't made it. It's when you get here to me and I'm just like humming and I'm hurting and everything. And then obviously John Carlyle, we started with Shane East. He was our John Carlyle originally. And then obviously we had Sean later. So, and that's a different journey. John Carlyle is a very personal journey for me. And that's a really hard one to talk about because that one is really the root of what was going on in my life. And so that's always a painful journey. Every listen when I do with that character is always a really challenging journey. So I don't know if I gave you too long of an answer, but that's kind of how I did it. So you
actually, TJ, are intimately involved in the production of the audiobook. And I would think that some authors like, okay, let's do an audiobook, and maybe your editor sends it off to a production company and they just kind of do it. And you're very, very much involved. Is that a conscious decision, or did it just kind of start happening when you were seeing the process, or was that something you wanted, this is something I want to do, and now it seems like you probably wouldn't do a book without an audiobook?
Well, so it's interesting. I never thought audio would get that much attention for me, but that's really where I picked up a lot of my fan base, actually. And I think it's just this incredible interpretation and team that I've worked with. So I have to give a lot of the credit where it's due. I think, so what happened was, as the Tory was produced, I just realized that I have too much emotional connection to my work to let anybody have all the control with it. And again, respect to all authors and whatever their journey is through audio and writing, but this was mine. And it's such an intimate part of me that I needed to have some level of control over it. I was very blessed because my first set of actors, they were so well chosen and they so understood my work that there wasn't really any direction that needed. You guys didn't need me. It was more as I started to expand and wanting to expand the vision that I was like, now I felt like I really needed to get more involvement and get closer to the work. But the thing was, the audio really changed the way I was writing. I was starting to write towards the audio and towards those performances. So the more intimate I got with the people working on it, the more intimate I was, and also affecting the writing style for the different narrators too, as well. So it was a symbiotic thing that they both kind of came together and really changed. And The Rebel was written literally for the people who are going to narrate it. The book was written for them. I actually created characters for certain people so I wouldn't lose certain narrators. And that's true. We can talk about that.
Great.
But so when I was on The Traitor and going into Man of War, Danielle Lansrada, who's my current producer, was just my sound engineer, not just, but she was my sound engineer through AudioFlow. She and I really saw the vision more closely than me and Jack did. So it was just a natural progression. She and I dovetailed off together, and we really partnered in the process for the Man of War, the Turncoat, the Rebel, and moving forward. We just had very similar visions, and she just really understood where I needed to be more involved. And then obviously we have a whole system we work together on to make sure that I don't step on her toes and that like I'm representing and recognizing everybody's role. But so I stepped into the position of executive producer as well. And then I help with the casting, and then I also help with all the fine edits and those different things and stuff like that. So it's expanded, but it was more about trying to get, okay, so full stop. When you make a movie on TV, someone else controls it, right? They control it. They control the script. They control everything. But when it's in audio, it's the book. It's the purest form of the author, right? And if you're choosing the voices and they're getting your suggestion, that is your story, as pure as it gets. Some people dream in TV. I dream in audio because that's me. That's my story. And if you've got the right people, then you have your real story coming to life. Audio is the perfect representation of your work coming to life. So for me, it was like, how can I really make it mine? And so that's it. And so Danielle, bless her heart, was like, okay, TJ, we'll figure out a way to make this work. And we did. And our conversations are very funny, but there are days where I'm like, all right, I know I'm going to be a pain here, but so yeah, that's how it happened. So yes, I am intimately involved.
So you've really assembled a dream team, so to speak, in all the gears of your entire production. And I guess I would think a lot of that has to do with you because you're attracting good people to work with, and you've maintained.
I hope so.
Yes.
So. Well, the bar was set high. I've got to be really honest. And I tell Tara this, and I tell Marnie, and I tell Patrick, and you can say regularly, if it wasn't for the bar that they set from the very beginning, where like they never were afraid to go for it. Like they just took the script and ran with these incredible performances. And it was so easy after that to go, yes, this is it. This is where it goes. And it takes that type of bravery too for, Tara to come out and do some very emotional scenes with Dallas and just owned that anguish or those moments and just go for them and dig in deep to her own heart and take it into her own emotional space. Or like Patrick, to not be afraid to be like yelling on my microphone and being all crazy on it. You know what I mean? It's like, and he laughs at me because sometimes I'll be like, okay, can you fix this? Can you pick up on this? And it'll be like, please yell more. And he laughs because he knows it's usually me being like, more. But they set the bar. I can't take credit. Tara, Marnie, Patrick, and Shane set the bar. And then everybody who came behind them, like just rose to the occasion. They just saw the beautiful work you guys did and just, kind of ran with it. And so it made, it set the standard, not me.
No, you set the standard. You did with we are you kidding? We couldn't voice there, the voice is from you. and it is your voice in so many different ways. So we couldn't do that without these incredible characters. And I love, this is something I love about TJ, which you can see in your energy. It's in your story. Like there's a fierceness. And I love the fact that you can't hold back with these. There's something Shakespearean about your story. That's why I love being a part of it, being part of all of this, being part of your process. So it's just extraordinary. And yeah, Shakespearean is right. There is something about that. So it's always wonderful just on this side of it too, as we're talking about the process. And as a narrator, working with TJ and working with the team was an absolute dream. Everything within that process just sort of really, really came together so well. So, and it's nice to be able to, as you said, send something off and be like, more. It's so nice to hear more.
Well, and
really is.
Well, here's the funny thing, Tara. I have to give her some street cred here, like seriously. So she sent me this beautiful scene in the Turncoat. I mean, it's tragic. The character's losing a baby, and she realizes it's happening, and it's just this emotional moment, and she's hysterical crying. The character is crying, and Tara's performance of this was just so passionate. And I'm looking at it, I'm going, okay, it's a little different from my dialogue, but it's so fantastic. I went and augmented my dialogue. And I mean it. I was just like, I've got to do what she has taken. She is the spirit of Dallas in this scene. And it was just, it was so small, just a few small things, but it was something I am not having this be a pickup. This is the way it was meant to be done. And that's what I love about the people that I work with. They get so passionate in some of the scenes that I'm like, you know what? This is okay. I'm actually okay with this. And, we're going to make and that's the beautiful thing about being an indie too. I have the ability to say, these are the things I'm going to fix. And this is what I love about their performances. So the audio has really your performances. And like I said, when I got to the Rebel, I wrote everything for the people who I cast in those roles. So and John Hartley is a perfect example of this. Whenever I'm writing, like, ha, 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 and I'm imitating him as I'm writing, and I've got him in my head, and I could just hear that snicker he does as a character. And so it's just, and it changed the way I write too now. So it was a gift. The audio was a gift to me.
So what you're actually saying is, many times screenwriters that come from the film world, screenwriters will have staged readings just to hear their work so they can further develop the final script. So you're actually, in a sense, using your audiobooks as part of your writing tools to write future work. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting. I truly play favorites sometimes, and Patrick Zeller is a favorite of mine. And his characters, he plays all the naughty guys. Okay, I'm just going to put it that way. He plays all the bad guys. And I was like, I need a good character for this guy, because eventually naughty characters die. Let's just be honest, right? So I'm like, I need to keep Patrick. Like, I can't not have him in my cast. And so I actually wrote a character just for him so that I could keep him. And then it bloomed this other story that was so interesting. So yeah, absolutely. It's kind of directed now what I do, but I wouldn't have had this kind of insight hadn't I been so intimately involved and got to know the people that I was working with and stuff like that. So I'm really fortunate. And I look at it like now I couldn't do what I do without the audio.
Is there a favorite scene of yours, like in any one of the books you did, an audiobook scene that just comes to mind as something you were really proud of, that once you heard it, you were like, wow?
One of them is a duel scene in the Turncoat, and it's because it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. These two brothers hate each other, and they're going to shoot each other, okay? And they're back to back, and so I have Cale Williams, and I have John Hartley. John Hartley's the angry older brother who wants to kill his younger brother. And I have John, the younger brother, who's like, what am I doing here? Like, why am I doing this? He's like, this is ridiculous. And he's thinking, and so we hear they're back to back. And John's taunting his brother while his brothers are yelling at him. He's like, I'm going to kill you, John. And so needless to say, it ends up that he shoots his brother, right? He shoots John. And now they're fighting. They're beating the heck out of each other. And then, of course, Dallas rides up, the wife, and is like, what are you doing? And she pulls out two guns and aims at both of them. She's like, I'm going to shoot both you idiots. And the performance of that scene is classic. Between Cale being like, you're being the bad blood, brother. And he's talking smack to him. And then there's John Hartley. I'm going to kill you, John. I'm going to kill you. And then we have Tara doing Dallas like, stop it, both of you. So it's the dramatic performance of this duel, and it is truly the best thing
Wonderful.
I've ever heard, honestly.
I hate you, brother. I hate you.
John groaned, his cheeks smarting every punch. That lying scoundrel of his past would have shot his brother, picked his pocket, and spent the night drinking and whoring on his behalf.
Joke all you like, brother, but you're going to prison for this. I'll see you hanged.
Suddenly, a loud pop echoed through the valley. Delis fired a warning shot as she rode up to them. All flushed and angry, she dismounted her horse like a beautiful virago, sweat glistening, smouldering gaze, dewy red lips, and those lush breasts further pressed together as she extended her arm and aimed her pistol at them.
Stop it! Both of you!
While her lusty shouts and lovely state of disarray were a daily affair for John, they were not for Gavin, who was slack-jawed and flagrantly eyeing her attributes.
So TJ, obviously there's a lot of there's sex scenes, or there's a lot of erotica in your stories. Can you talk a little bit about where that comes from and how that's integral to your story?
It's really hard to explain because you're so in the zone when you're writing because there's a lot of things going on in a sex scene. There's action, there's emotion, there's progression of story, there's moaning and groaning, and there's all the things, right? And you're trying to get a story, because when I write a sex scene in a book, I'm trying to progress the story. It's not just they're gonna bang, right? We're gonna it's gonna go through the process. Here we are, right? And so there's things that must happen, okay? So then when I write it and I go back and I read, I'm like, okay, I need more action here, more adventure, more description, more this, more that. You know what I mean? You're not in the space where now you're just reading it as a reader, right? And it's even harder as an author because you never can purely just read it as a reader. But when you listen to it, that's different. And then you've got somebody who's performing it and you're like, it's like somebody's in the room with you. It's like a voyeur almost. It's very weird. So, yeah, I really struggle with that.
Great,
and even kiss scenes.
Great process of breaking down how you do the sex scenes.
I know. And it's funny because, like I said, people every author's got a different point to them when they do that, right? But for me, the biggest thing is one of the biggest complaints I got by a lot of readers. They got to the end of the Tory and they're like, they haven't hit it yet. Why haven't they hit it yet? The climax of the book is them hitting it at the end of the book, actually, because this man's lying to her the whole time. And he's also very intimately involved in bad things that happen to this woman.
Yes.
So he's going to jump into bed with her, there's a conflict of interest there. That's the problem, right? So if you're going to tell a sex scene in a story like that, you must have purpose. And you have to be careful because of the nature of what's going on in the story. So every one of my sex scenes, I never have an easy one where they're like, hey, let's just hit it, It's always there's something big in the story going on that takes us into this place where two people are intimate.
That's why there's
I try.
Good, because there's just so much build up and there's so much going on and there's all this emotion.
That's
and
my
it's like
hope.
That happens and you're like,
well, the funny thing about that is I had a fan who once said to me, she goes, here I'm listening to this very serious, violent story and this very historic background, and there's a lot going on. And then you drop this boom, fire sex scene right in there. And I was like, wow, I didn't see that coming. And I was like, but if you're going to be descriptive in your history and in your romance and your passion, you can't just slam the door shut and be like, you don't need to know what's going on over there. No, nobody's business. Nobody's seen anything. You have to open the door. You have to deliver on that.
So TJ, where can people find you?
Well, I have my website, www.revolutionaryauthor.com. Yay. I am on Twitter at TJ London Author. I am on Facebook at TJ London Author. I am also on TikTok as well as on Instagram. I'm on all the social media platforms under TJ London Author. Sometimes I have to accept you just because. So just send a friend and I will friend you and you'll get to join the revolution. And so that's where you can find me. But I'm pretty active on Twitter. I know X, whatever they call it right now, X. And Instagram. I'm pretty active on Instagram too. So, you never know though if you tweet at me, I might tweet back. So, right. You never know what you're going to get. There you go.
Tell us, how many awards, Voice Arts Awards, are you nominated for, Miss TJ London?
6 this year. We've been nominated for 14 total in our 4 audiobooks, and we've won 6 so far. So it's been really exciting.
See that, everybody listening?
But it's you guys.
It's the process, right? It's the process of everyone.
It's the process. Well, no, It takes every person to make an audiobook, right? From the script to the narrators to the sound engineering to the proofing. It's the whole process. I mean, it literally takes a village to make, to make a book great, but it takes a village to also make an audiobook great. So it takes all the things.
Ever think that too? Like when you're talking about your journey today and hearing all of those, going to all of those critics and those no's and all of those things, did you ever think, hey, well, now look at, I've got, 6 awards, nominated for 6 more, got these incredible fans. This is a testament to you, TJ, and your warrior spirit.
Oh, thank you.
And I think everybody can take a lesson from that as creatives when we're fearful and we're getting that criticism, because it's very easy to stop. It's very easy to give up and walk away, right? We all have those moments.
I still have my moments.
We all do. Part of it.
I still have my moments when I'm like, oh, please. Here's the thing. Like, you can never plot your course. Like, we all try to control it and say, this is what it's going to look like. You do, because obviously as artists, we control the process, right? Like, we're talking about process, but we can't control the journey. You can control the process, but you can't control the journey. That's the cosmos. That's the world. So did I ever think audio would really be the conduit that would make my stories find readers? No. First of all, did I ever think it would be an author, right? We've talked about that. So you can control your process, but you can't control your journey. So you kind of have to just kind of sit back and go, the road less traveled. And it was, the Robert Frost version. Okay, it's the road I took, But the truth is that you have to ride out the journey, and it's going to be it's going to be bumpy, and it's going to have positives and negatives, but you have to be the cheerleader for yourself, and you have to believe more than everybody else. And I have lots of challenges still yet to go as an author and trying to get my work out and those things. But, what's interesting, if you had asked me 7 years ago, when I first started writing, would I be here? I didn't even know if I was going to make it to the next day. So right now, for me, everything related to the Tory is kismet. I always tell that to everyone. I have a short that says everything with the Tory is kismet. The fact that I'm even having this conversation with you today is a blessing that came out of sitting down with a counselor one day, and she said, why don't you write? Write to save your life. Write to change your destiny, write to change your history. So the fact that you and I are talking today, I could never have anticipated. So just ride the journey out and stay with it. And that's my story,
Brilliant. Wow. God, thank you
so brilliant.
so much, TJ, for just your vulnerability and your honesty and just opening up your work and how you go about it with our audience. We really appreciate it.
So the one coming up with the Rebel, that one's really hot. And I'm like, so it's funny, after I wrote it, I'm like, because Adam Gold, okay, this man smolders like nobody's business. Like, he's just like, oh, he breathes. And I'm like, good Lord, I can't listen to this. Okay. Nicholas Bolton, by the way.
Oh my God.
I want to talk about a dreamboat. And so talented. Okay, so we're in a live, mind you, a live. And there's a bunch of us in this. And so he goes, so, TJ, how do you write your sex scenes? I'm like, haha, you're funny asking me that. I don't talk about my sex scenes. And I'm like, so, how do you narrate your sex scenes? He's like, well, I climb into the hammock with my wife and I find out if it works. I'm like,